On March 10th, Notre Dame suffered a loss to North Carolina in the second round of the ACC tournament, a score of 101-59. Um, just kind of put a stamp on a season to forget for the Notre Dame men's basketball program. 11-15 finish, 7-11 in conference. Just again, a season where you felt like Notre Dame might be able to string off a bunch of wins here late in the season and go on a run and potentially be a bubble team. Well, that's not how it ended, Lou. So let's talk about the future of Mike Brey in the Notre Dame's men's basketball program. What are your thoughts, having covered the team for so long?
Well, earlier in the year, about the halfway point when Notre Dame started 0-5 in the ACC play, my feeling was, my gosh, this feels so similar to Digger Phelps's last year, his 20th year, 30 years ago in 1991, in that there was an awkwardness. Digger had had a very successful tenure, but it was so obvious and so evident that the program had become stale and lost its fire, lost its energy. And he was told before the season by the administration, this is your last season no matter what. And it was just an ugly year because what they had to do was stop with the introduction of his name too, because it led to just boos from the
Mm.
student body. So they opted not to even introduce him. And, you're seeing similar things with Mike Brey. Now, Mike is such an affable, likable individual that even though he was booed by a few at Notre Dame's home game last week against North Carolina State after a really bad performance, and Mike said it was well deserved, there just remains that awkwardness about, here's a guy who's had a very successful tenure through 21 years, but the recruiting has not been the best. When you look at the future of the program, the trajectory, you've had now your second losing season in 3 years. And this was a down year in the ACC. You have to ask the hard questions of, where is this program headed? Does it have the energy? Does it have the life to become, a factor again? And, Mike yesterday after the loss to North Carolina mentioned, hey, it's like year seven. He went 3 straight years from 2004 to six. Those were his fourth, fifth, and sixth seasons where they did make the NCAA tournament, did make the NIT, but he was actually contemplating then taking the North Carolina State position. He said he felt, I've run my course at Notre Dame. This is all I can do. And it was Mike Krzyzewski, who he had coached under at Duke, including a couple of national titles from the late 80s and early 90s, who told him, no, this is your place. You can do this. And he went on a very, very good run, highlighted by the ACC title in 2015 and back-to-back Elite Eights. But the frustration is that they have not been able to build on it. And if anything, they have really just been on a downhill slope since then. And look, when Brian Kelly had that 4-8 season in 2016, there had to be some major, major changes within the infrastructure. And one way or another, they can't keep going on at what they're doing right now at this rate, because it's just going to perpetuate itself unless there are some really hard questions and hard discussions between Mike and the administration as to where this program is going.
What if some of those conversations don't happen? What if it's the same staff? You bring in Paul Atkinson and your two recruits from locally, and J.R. Konetsky and Blake Wesley. What if that's just it? I mean, I feel like the Notre Dame fan base would just be like, well,
Mhm.
here we go again.
Yeah. Well, Mike pretty much inferred yesterday after the game against North Carolina is, we got to make the NCAA tournament next year. Period. That's it. That's the line in the sand. He wouldn't come out and say, if we don't make the NCAA tournament, I'm stepping down. That's not something you do publicly. But the inference was absolutely there. Joe Gibbs, the legendary coach for the Washington, and I guess I can't say it anymore, but the Washington football team that won 3 Super Bowls back in the 90s, he said the key to coaching, especially at the professional level, is Do not lose 3 games in a row. Can you lose two or something? But once you get into three, you're in danger. And for Power Five coaches in the NCAA, college basketball, do not miss the NCAA tournament 3 straight years.
Mm.
And basically, it's almost four because unless they would have made a dramatic run last year in the COVID year that canceled this is 4 years running now, and that's unsettling. And you're going to have 7 seniors on the team next year, 6 of them who have played a lot of minutes. That's always been the MO of the program, is to stay old, that you compensate for the lack of, let's say, superior skills like jumping or speed or everything with basketball IQ and knowledge, which his teams have always been, renowned for. But this kind of slump, um, it's it's hard to dig out of. And if you lose some early games next year, it can really create the backlash where the fan support just gets even. There's already kind of a learned helplessness, but you get off to a slow start again next year. And I don't think they're going to have the type of schedule next year like they did this year, where I think maybe there was a little overconfidence about what this team can achieve. Um, then it could get nasty.
So this is pretty sombering video so far for faithful of the Notre Dame men's basketball program. Let's get a little bit more cheerful, potentially, unless there's nothing to be cheerful about. You did mention all those seniors coming back and the experience. What's the optimistic viewpoint here that Notre Dame, does have talent? Paul Atkinson, Trey Wirt, some of these guys. Like, what's kind of the view of like, wow, this team could be, a team that not only makes the tournament but could make some noise.
Well, he's bounced back before, like we mentioned, 2004 through 2006. It was like, okay, have I run my course? And boy, the next year he's the Big East Coach of the Year. They go 24-8, become really competitive again. And in 2014, they finished under 500, and it's like, okay, this time it looks like he's really run his course. Then they have one of the most astounding seasons in Notre Dame history, 32-6, win the ACC championship, beating Duke, the national champion that year, and North Carolina, the national champion the next year, in back-to-back games, almost upsetting number one Kentucky in the Elite Eight, one shot away from there, from the Final Four, and then repeating an Elite Eight the following year as well. You think you have it going there. So he's bounced back. He's been in that position, but can he do it a third time now? Does he have the fire, the energy to do it once again? We hope so, because you want him to go out on a good term. But Mike, there have been 3 coaches in Notre Dame men's basketball history that made it to back-to-back Elite Eights. Johnny Jordan in the 50s, Digger Phelps in the 70s, and Mike Brey in the 2010s. And in each case, Johnny Jordan was booed by the student body his last year and finished with a losing record. Digger Phelps finished his last year 12-20 and was booed by the student body. And, you don't want to see this happen to Mike Brey there, but, something's got to change within the infrastructure for them to dig out of this hole.
So Notre Dame fans watching this, what do you think about the future of Mike Brey and the Notre Dame basketball program? Make sure you leave us your comments and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel here for more Notre Dame athletics coverage.